Very good evening to you all. I hope you are all are doing good. Your days for the civil services mains examination are coming near day by day, and I hope you are doing very well. Now it's high time to write a lot of answers because I have taught you how to build the answers. Now this is the time to practice more and more for your mains answer writing. Right? I am taking up as much as the mains answer writing, the PYQ question, the PYQs of the civil services mains examination, and my motto is very simple: to make you score high in the examination so that you can secure your name in the final merit list. Now we have discussed the question of mostly questions of modern Indian history from UPSC civil services mains 2024 to 2020. Now I've come up here with a question of civil services mains examination 2019. So what is our motto? What is our motto? Our motto is to detect. After these sessions, we will detect certain themes that are repeatedly asked in your examination. And again, I must tell you that answer writing is an art. You will have to practice day in day out. It will not come to you overnight. Now you have less than 60 days remaining for the examination. What you need to do, you need to focus on your major chunks of the examination. Generally we see the environment and ecology and geography major chunks of the prelims examination, but certainly yes, there are three major chunks of the mains examination, yet you need to focus each and every section individually, because there is no examination like mains examination. There is no examination like civil services mains examination. Why? Because this checks your ability to analyze, ability to critically analyze, ability to elucidate, ability to comment, right? So this is the backbone of this examination. This is the backbone of this examination to score higher in the mains examination. The more you score high in the mains examination, the less you need to rely on the interview process, because interview process is very unpredictable. You will have a panel. Let us suppose you could not satisfy the demands of the panel, you could not satisfy the ideology of the panel, you can be penalized at each and every point. But you score very high in the mains examination, then your chances to get into the merit list are better. Now what is the agenda? What is the agenda of this program? Is to make you feel free. Because mains enrichment programs in the markets are very costly, and you are here getting the free guidance. I'm showing you the PPTs, I'm analyzing all the PYQs, and definitely we will take up one more session, especially for the people who are appearing for the UPSC civil services mains in year of 2026. How themes are repeating and how to study for the civil services, right? So the question for the day is access the role of British imperial power in complicating the process of transfer of power during the 1940s. And word limit is 250 words, and this question is a 15 marker question. This question is a 15 marker question. So what they are asking, what I have told you through this session, first of all, you need to understand the demand of the question. Then you need to learn how to fragment the question. If you are excel in fragmenting the question, that means you will provide valid points in the body of the answer. So first of all, you need to access. It's an assessment, right? When you assess something, let us suppose I am assessing your copies, I am assessing your examination copies. So what will I remark? I will give the remarks that you score higher in this section, you score lower in this section, you are good at in this section, you are not good at in that particular section. This is the kind of assessment. In your elementary classes, even in your elementary classes, the concept of assessment is there, is to assess your abilities. How good at you are spelling, how good at you are writing, how good at you are speaking, how good at you are essay writing, how good at you are the extracurricular, how good at you are the other academics, right? So the main issue is that. So here what we are doing, we are going to assess. We are going to assess. Now let us see role of British imperial powers in complicating the process of transfer of power. So what is transfer of power? What is transfer of power? You know the very famous statement given by Governor General of Viceroy Lord Louis Mountbatten, the situation in India getting worse and worse day in day out. The only way to resolve the deadlock is the partition. And what kind of partition it was? To part India in two dominion, India and Pakistan. And this was the transfer of power. And it was pre-decided on June 18th, 1948. It was pre-decided on June 18th, 1948. But it was done, as a preemptive action due to Hindu-Muslim riots on 15th of August 1947. So this question is a very deep question. Generally we say the day of 15th August 1947 is our Independence Day. It is for us. We were politically liberated. We were politically independent from the British Raj. On 16th of August, the newspaper were full of the headings, the end of British Raj, that we are now politically, independent. India is now a sovereign nation. There is no authority of any kind of external power on us. We can maintain our affairs on our own choices. We can, discuss, we can formulate our policies for defense. We can formulate our policies for external affairs. Right? Here, the transfer of powers, the process of transfer of power started in 1940s. The process of transfer of power, the formation of a dominion state, the formation of a constituent assembly was a continuous process since late 1920s. Many movements we launched: civil disobedience movement, Quit India movement, to get the political liberation. But in return, what we got? We got, the false promises, oppression, massacres, right? So now, this process of transfer of power came into the existence robustly. Wartime priorities and imperial control. Yes, wartime period and imperial control. Yes. So, Tilak, we will discuss it later. Wartime priorities and imperial control. So now what is happening here? The transfer of power, the process of transfer of power will be implemented robustly in late 1930s and in early 1940s. Right? So we have come to know about the precise timeline. What is the precise timeline? What is the precise timeline? From late 1930s to early 1940s. Right? So what happened? What was the context? What was the context? What was the context? What was the context? So the story started with the year of 1937, when the election of provinces took place, and Congress, Congress got a remarkable victory. They got the majority governments in certain states. they got the coalition government in certain states, and they were absent from a few states, right? But Congress managed to win the elections. Now, now Now, in 1939, World War II broke out. World War II broke out. And what British will do? Without asking the Indian leaders, British authority declared that Indians are supporting us in World War II. India is supporting us. Its leaders, its masses are supporting us in World War II. And that created problem for the British as well as created problem for the Indian masses and the Indian leaders. Indian leader did not like this approach of British authority, and they immediately resigned from their all political posts and started looking for the mass movements, right? British authority declared Indian support in the war even without the Indian consent, right? Even without the Indian consent. Now what will happen? Most of the Indian leaders will resign, and they will look up to the launching of any mass movement. As I told you in my previous session, there was a matter arised when Japanese forces, knocked the borders of Myanmar, of Burma, and Gandhi launched his mass movement, which is known as the Quit India movement. The main reason behind that, Gandhi and his followers had a lot of sympathy with the people who were suffering from fascism, the Italian fascism. But it was not possible for an enslaved nation like India, which was a slave of British, to support them directly. Hence, they launched a mass movement, the Quit India movement, because Japanese were very offensive. They came on the border of Burma, and it was a clear warning for the British from the Gandhian side that if you want to leave India, then please leave it at any cost, at any condition. Leave us. So this was a different story, but what British will do? They will start throwing the series of negotiations to appease Indian rulers so that they can get the required support in the World War II. So now Indian leaders resigned from all designations, right? Now what will happen? To appease Indians, British will throw a series of negotiations. So in 1940, you will see the August offer, which will aim to expand the Executive Council of Viceroy, as well as to provide India. Tilak is saying Cripps mission. Cripps mission will come after this August offer, which will provide India a dominion status, as well as it will expand the Executive Council of Viceroy. Now in 1942, in 1942, after the failure of this August offer, they will come with next series of negotiation, which is known as Cripps Mission, which is known as Cripps Mission. Right? In 1945, with the end of World War II, they will come up with a plan of Shimla Agreement, Shimla Agreement, or the Wavell Plan, or the Wavell Plan, or the Wavell Plan. And at the end of the day, end of their reign, they will come up with a plan which is known as Cabinet Mission. Cabinet Mission. All these plans were focused for adequate transfer of power, to the Indians. But British were always reluctant to provide all the powers in the Indian hands, as they had a very imperialistic mindset, because they were fighting the World War II under the leadership of Winston Churchill. And Winston Churchill was a conservative politician of Britain. He was a conservative prime minister, and he had a very narrow mindset. He had the old mentality of imperialism, that we, at any cost, we will not leave India. India is our colony. India is our slave. And British, the son of British Empire, will never set down. Right? This was the mentality of Winston Churchill. But by the end of World War II, the Labour Party came into the power. Even many of the Indian leaders, supported the Labour Party. They supported the Labour Party even in London. Right? So British were always reluctant to provide all the powers to Indians, because at the end of the day, nobody wants to dethrone from their territories. And India was a British territory, professionally, if you say, the British colony. Right? It was the World War II, it was the Balkan Plan. There are many things that British people went bankrupt, almost bankrupt, and they have their investors in India, and investors threatened them that you should leave India, but you should do the repayment of our investments. Right? So this was the context. So this is how we will frame our introduction. We will frame the body points, and then conclusion, So now the first is introduction. The 1940s were a critical period in Indian national movement, as British imperial power sought to transfer power to India while simultaneously seeking Indian cooperation in World War II. As I told you, because British unilaterally declared the Indian support in World War II, because they were seeking the Indian support. They knew the importance of Indian soldier, as they have seen the might of Indian soldiers in World War I. Hence they required the Indian soldiers, they required Indian people in the war. So it was the first generation of warfare where manpower mattered. So, however, the British were unwilling to transfer any real power to Indian hands, and their actions during this period were instrumental in complicating the transfer of power. As I told you in my context, British never wanted to transfer the real powers in Indian hands, not because that Indians were not adequate to handle the power, but it was the mindset of British politicians. It was the imperialistic and the conservative mindset of British authority. Okay. First of all, August offer in 1940, the Viceroy Lord Linlithgow proposed expansion of the Viceroy's Executive Council with mostly Indians, and a constituent assembly post-war with mostly Indians. However, the terms were unacceptable, as it did not allow the full powers to be in Indian hands. So, the Governor General or Viceroy Lord Linlithgow came into the picture, and he offered that I will increase seats in the Governor General's Executive Council. I will include much more Indians in the administration. And after the war, there will be a constituent assembly that will determine the Indian constitution, which was challenged by Lord Birkenhead way back in 1928. Right? But this was a rotten idea. This was a rotten idea. Why? Because he said that we are here to provide India a dominion status. A dominion status, and the theory of dominion status was completely outdated at that time. Because in 1929, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, after the failure of Nehru Report, which was propounded and proposed to British by his father Motilal Nehru, failed. Jawaharlal Nehru's message was very clear. I advocate for Purn Swaraj, the complete and total independence, the total democracy in the country, the model of socialism, and I do not regard any kind of king, any kind of industrial authority, any kind of monarchy in this country. So the idea of dominant state was rotten that time. Now, however, the terms of condition are unacceptable, as it did not allow for full powers to be in Indian hands. And what kind of powers? The total independence, right? And made future constitutions dependent on the consent of minorities. This offer was rejected by Indian leaders. Now, the formation of the Constitution of India that time was not that much clear. It was a vague idea. It was a vague idea, and most of the powers were given in the hands of minority to appease Jinnah and his community people. Next is the Cripps mission. Cripps mission came into India. By the way, Cripps was a barrister, and Cripps was a very good friend of Jawaharlal Nehru. They were the course mates in the barrister course at Cambridge. Now, Sir Strafford Cripps came with his own negotiations in 1942, and he was in hurry because in 1942 the Japanese army were on the Indian borders, and they were about to attack the British settlements. So that was the reason why Cripps was sent in a hasty manner to negotiate with Indians. And now what Cripps said, the Cripps mission proposed inflexible offers that were again mostly unsatisfying for Indians. The terms offered again the dominion status, a partly elected and partly nominated constituent assembly provision for provinces to have separate constitution if they wish, and defense and portfolios remaining in British hands. So I have, in my 15-minute series, I explained this Cripps mission separately because Cripps came with an agenda. He was in hurry. He wanted to appease more and more Indians as soon as possible. As soon as possible he could. Now, what he offered? He offered the rotten concept of dominion status. Even Jawaharlal Nehru called him the devil's advocate for this attempt. He said, Cripps, you know me very well. What is my ideology? This is my nation. This is my land. We all are fighting for the independence, the total independence, and you have come up with this concept of dominion status. Now, he also made provisions for the provinces to maintain the separate constitution. Even at present time, before the repealation of Article 370, which was prevailing in Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir was having a separate constitution. Imagine if Indian would accept this kind of negotiations from Cripps' side, that provinces will be able to maintain the separate constitution. What would be the country's situation at present? Right? So these provisions were completely rejected by the Indian leaders. And the next provision was they provided all the powers, but defense portfolio remaining in British hands, which means British will use Indian defense as per their choice. Let us suppose at present time your defense affairs are in the British hands. They will push you in Afghanistan, they will push you in Iraq, they will push you in Operation Desert Storm and Desert Shield of 1990, Gulf War. Would you accept it? No, absolutely no. So these negotiations were not accepted to the Indian leaders, were not accepted to the Indian leaders. So these provisions were again objected by Indians, and the failure of Cripps mission only proved that the British had sent this mission to pretend that they were interested in they were not interested in Indian independence, right? So this was not a real transfer of power, Okay. Next is Wavell Plan and Shimla Conference. So it was 1945. It was 1945 when World War II was over. Now British and their allies, especially the British, they suffered heavy losses. Due to the bombardment of German Air Force, especially on London. Their industries got exhausted and they were in a debt trap. So now Lord Wavell visited Indian leaders at Shimla, which is known as the Shimla Conference. Lord Wavell was a kind man. He proposed certain legislations, certain ideas. And what were these ideas? Let us see. He proposed the formation of a new executive council at the center, in which all members except the viceroy and commander in chief would be Indian. What he proposed? He proposed that I am going to create a new executive council of viceroy at center, right? What was the structure that time? There was center and there were certain provinces, right, under the center. Now what is happening here? At center there is the governor general. Or viceroy, and there are governors of state, governors of provinces. Now they have their own executive council, and they have their own executive council. Right? They have their own executive council and they have their own executive council. Right? Now, what he's saying, he's talking about this executive council. He's talking about this executive council. He's saying that I will reform or reconstruct this executive council, and there will be two non-Indians, only two non-Indians. Means all the members of this executive council at center will be Indians, except two. One is Viceroy himself and another was his commander-in-chief, which means the chief of British Army as well as the Viceroy will be the only British people in this executive council at center. Rest, all of them will be Indians. This was a very good plan. But there were certain concerns. There were certain very serious concerns, right? All portfolios except defense were to be under control of Indian members, which means Indians could not obtain the power to decide their defense affairs, and that was a big challenge, right? The plan proposed over-representation of Muslims in the executive councils, and this was not acceptable to the Congress. So Wavell came here to appease Muhammad Ali Jinnah in certain ways, because he provided them the extra representation as well as defense affairs, the defense portfolio took away from Indian hands, or it was not the part of Indian side. It was not the part of Indian side. Now, now next is cabinet mission. It came in 1946, and after, when Congress rejected the Wavell plan, in this timeline, the Muslim League under the leadership of Jinnah declared, the direct action, declared the direct action. And what was direct action? The riots. Among these riots, the cabinet mission plan came with 3 members: Patrick Lawrence, Stafford Cripps, and A.V. Alexander. Now, aim of this mission was to form an interim government and formation of the Constituent Assembly. So now they left the idea of Governor Generals of Executive Council. They advocated the concept of an interim government, a temporary government for Indians, by Indians, and the Constituent Assembly. So what was the concept? An interim government will rule India until the formation of an adequate constitution by the Constituent Assembly. Mark my words. What was the concept behind this interim government? It was the form an interim government. Why? To form a Constituent Assembly that will create a competent constitution for Indians. The contentious issue of the mission's proposal was to have a grouping of provinces that was compulsory. Now, while Congress interpreted it to be optional, the Muslim League wanted it to be compulsory. This made Congress reject the offer again, while the Muslim League complicated the situation by announcing the direct action. Why? Because the cabinet mission, what they are offering, grouping of provinces. They created, different provinces which were, Muslim, which had Muslim majority. Certain states had the Hindu majority. One state had Sikh majority. So what cabinet mission did? Instead of transferring the real powers, they played a politics of polarization. Right? Now it was completely unacceptable to the Congress, and they rejected them. And it was not, it frowned the eyes of Muslim community. It frowned the eyes of Jinnah, and they proposed a direct action plan against the Congress. A lot of riots happening, and after the Hindu-Muslim deadlock in 1947, Indian Independence Act was enacted by the British authority. The last Governor General of Viceroy, Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten, visited India, and he solved this deadlock by partition of this, the British India into 2 dominions, India and Pakistan. So this is how, amid a lot of chaos, the power was transferred, and it was not the ideology of British people. It happened as per the circumstances, right? So what is the conclusion? All these actions of British imperial power ultimately fueled communal sentiments, right, as we have seen in the body, which eventually led to the partition of India. It is clear that the British tried to delay independence deliberately in order to prevent the imminent fall of their empire. Right? What I told you, that no ruler or no, the topmost authority wants to lose their throne. They want their authority, but British suffered heavy losses, and there was no option remained. Right? The 1940s thus turned out to be a period of instability that gave rise to a new world where the British lost their glory permanently. Which means the statement of Winston Churchill proved wrong, that the sun of British empire never sets. It settled down completely. settled down completely, right? So this was, the talk for the day. This question was asked in UPSC Civil Services 2019, and these points are enough to present an adequate answer with a word limit of 250 words, which has, which will provide you 15 marks. I'm not saying you'll get 15 out of 15, because no answer in mains examination is a perfect answer. They're not looking for the perfect answer, not looking for the right answers. They're looking for the right approach, which is the key requirement of the UPSC Civil Services as far as mains examination is concerned, right? So in next session, we will meet again with one more mains answer writing question, right? So till then, take care. Have a nice day.